We'll have to change the title to 21 Things That We Learned, because that was good. So next one, and this was very intentional on our end as we were coming up with the concepts with Lemon Pie, the podcasting agency. Conversations are much easier to create than interviews. And I think when we were reading through some of those concepts, almost every podcast out there today is an interview style format where the person or company hosting the podcast interviews some other non-employee, and they're kind of positioned as the expert or really just the focus of the interview. And you don't really get to, show off not just the people, but what's going on within, your own company. So for us, we thought it was much easier from a logistical perspective and from just the relationship that Jason and I have and you and I have, and really the rest of the marketing team has. And you'll see more of them as we record more episodes. But it's just been so much easier to pick a single topic and really go deep on that topic with somebody that because our gripe with most of the other podcasts out there was, even when they do interview style podcasts, they talk about a million things at a surface level and you don't really go deep on any one of them.
Yeah, it was totally, it was selfish on, pulled behind the curtain here, selfish on my part. I had done a very small sort of version of this when I was at TechSmith too, and it just made, probably when we hit right around this mark, right around the 25 plus episode mark, people started commenting and saying, hey, I just love the conversations. We had two different shows. We had one show that was more interview, traditional style, and one show that was just the, simple conversations. And I think what you don't get in the more interview style is you don't get to know the people behind the show. One of the reasons, pick a most popular podcast, the reason you probably enjoy them is because at the end of the day, you probably feel like you get to know them to where if you saw them in the street, you'd be like, oh, I already know enough about so-and-so. Even though they've never met me, I feel like I know what they like. I feel like I know how they talk. That's what makes podcasting so interesting, is it's intimate in that way. And so that's what I kind of wanted to reproduce with Metadata show, even though literally that was not the type of show that we got pitched at all. So I was like, I actually want to do something different. I think it makes for a different sort of just content strategy, which is unique. We're always trying to do different things at Metadata, but then also it allows us to really show off the experts that we have, which not every show does.
Yeah, and I think there's been a bunch of these, but there's one in particular where I laughed when somebody sent the gong recording, but it was one of our target accounts took it was a demo with us, and their head of marketing had been listening to DGU for, as many episodes as we had at that point. And she said something to the extent of, where's Mark and Jason? And I forget who the AE was, but the AE was working. She was like, oh, I just kind of assumed that they'd be on the demo after, listening to all these episodes. And yes, is that a funny, unique example? For sure. But when we're, building relationships for our sales team, with people that we've never met before and kind of warming people up, you can't measure that. That's the whole goal of the podcast.
Yeah, no, totally. It's one of those things that it almost makes now that I've done it a few times, it almost makes too much sense. I totally see the other side of the coin. I've had conversations with other podcasters, other companies, to where, hey, interviewing prospects, interviewing, people in your ICP, getting their expertise, building those relationships with them from a podcast perspective as just using it almost as a nurturing sort of thing. That totally makes sense. I get that. But I think in terms of moving a company away from what you would traditionally do as quote unquote thought leadership, blog content or something like that. That's something we've had those conversations too between me, you, and Jason, where it's hey, you don't have to do a thought leadership blog because you're literally doing thought leadership. Quote unquote. You're giving your opinions. That's what I call it. You're giving your opinions every single week. It's just recorded and put on a show.
Yeah. I love giving opinions more than thought leadership, because I think thought leadership is so overused.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing on this before we get to the next one is, you've been on quite a few podcasts before. Jason has, I have. And in my own experience, maybe when I was just starting to get asked to be on podcasts, I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Why the hell would somebody want to talk to me? And then you record an episode, and at the end of it, they're like, oh, and we'd like to try and set up a meeting for your, whatever they're selling. It's oh, okay. You kind of bamboozled me there. I don't really want to do that. So I think for us, like, what the intent is behind the podcast. There's entertainment, there's value, there's, tactical things that we're trying to share with you. And then also what are the things that we're learning and messing up and kind of building in public. And I think it's just the authentic, like raw nature of those conversations that have made this,